So, as the thumbnail suggests, this review is actually for a book called Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. Maybe Bardugo. I actually finished this book a few days ago, but I've been pretty busy and I never had a chance to review it. I've been thinking about it a fair bit, and I actually enjoyed it enough that I went straight to the library site and ordered number 2, which I've started. Not that far in, maybe about a quarter. And number 3 should be on the way. So I'll read them all, I suspect. Unless number 2 does something horrible to me, I'll read them all straight up. And that's a good thing to say about a series. Now, Shadow and Bone, I'll start with the fact that the reason that I started reviewing books was because I would get books that I couldn't remember having read. Shadow and Bone was published in, 2012 by the look of it? And I must have read most of it because I thought it looked good, I thought it sounded good. I picked it up and I was reading it. I didn't remember having read it before, and I couldn't remember the book the way, I don't know, you'd remember A Diving Holiday in Cairns, for example. I couldn't remember the book like I remember everything that happened in A Terry Pratchett, for example. No, but as I read it, I went, geez, these characters seem really familiar. Hey, this orphanage rings a bell. And finally I got to the point where, as I was reading something, I was kind of remembering what I thought was going to happen next, and I was mostly correct. So my guess is that I had read at least half of this book before. I don't remember the circumstances. I don't know why I didn't finish, and I didn't. The end was a complete surprise. And I didn't review it. I didn't even list it on Goodreads as read, acquired, unread, did not finish. I don't know why I didn't finish it. From my vague memories of reading it, I think I enjoyed the reading, and this time I certainly enjoyed the reading. But yeah, so that's why I review. It's like I read too many books, I know that, and I don't remember them very well. No, I know that too. So reviews are my way of keeping track of which ones I've read, what I thought about them, whether I should keep going with that author or that series. Both of which I will do in the case of Shadow and Bone and Leigh Bardugo. Maybe Bardugo. So Shadow and Bone starts out good. It starts out with 2 war orphans in a country that is very, very, it's very fantasy, but it's very, very not normal young adult commonality fantasy, which tends to be usually a kind of Americanized version of Fantasyland. This is a Cyrillic version of Fantasyland. So you've got vague Russian connotations. You've got a couple of names that I'm pretty sure I recognize as Polish. You've got things that make it feel alien as well as fantasy. Okay, so we start off in this orphanage. This orphanage is actually the country house, castle, something, of a duke who has turned it into an orphanage for war orphans. And we start with 2 particular characters. We start with Alina and Mel. Now, Alina and Mel aren't particularly impressive. They're good friends and they're troublemakers and they run around. And that early segment ends when the mysterious Grisha turn up to test them for powers. Now, in the front of the book, you've got an explanation of the Grisha, which are also called the Second Army, and they're basically the paranormal part of the army. The first army being, I believe, normal army, second army, paranormal. So you've got 3 different characteristics, or 3 different squads. One includes people who do something horrible to people's hearts so that they die, or healers. So the same skill used in 2 different ways. Then you've got summoners, which can summon water, wind, and fire. Earth apparently isn't a summoning option. And then you've got fabricators, who basically craft things. That's at the front of the book, and it's just as well, because for at least half this book I had to refer to that whenever they mentioned a name that I hadn't seen recently. It Okay, so the start is good. It sets the scene. It sets the scene with small things like samovars and names that you can't pronounce, and I really enjoyed that. Young adult is such a huge YA fantasy is such a huge genre these days. It's hard for it to do something that's really different, and here I think it did. I also think this could work well as an audiobook because the dynamic of it says to me that if you get a person with a slight accent, it's going to feel exciting and foreign and interesting. So what happens next is we jump ahead about a decade, and at first we don't know how Alina and Mal got to where they are, but where they are is clearly an army, and it turns out that neither of them are special. Mal is a tracker, he's a very good tracker, but just a tracker. Alina is a map maker, a cartographer, or at least one in training, and they're travelling with the army towards the Shadowfold. Da 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 da. I wish I could sing. I can't. So the Shadowfold is something that was created by a particular paranormal who was mad or whatever decades ago, like 4 generations ago or something. It's a swath of black, of actual darkness that lies on the land, and in an area that used to have farms and farmers and life, all it's got is you go into this darkness and there's killing creatures in there of supernatural origin. Alina's really scared of it. Mel admits he's a bit scared of it. The two aren't as close friends as they were when they were kids. Sorry, I have a bird. He's got opinions. The two aren't as close as they were when they were kids, but they still hang around together. Alina is in love with Mel, but he's very good looking and she's very scrawny, and so he has heaps of girls after him, and she stays friends with him. They travel into this shade, swath, Shadowfold, and these creatures, supernatural flying creatures, come to attack them, and something happens, a light bursts, and next thing we know is Alina is scooped up because they believe that she's a sun summoner and she's the one that produced the light burst. The head of the second army, all these supernaturally power users, is called the Darkling. He summons darkness like the Shadowfold, but outside it, and it was a Darkling back in history, generations ago, who first put the Shadowfold in place. He says he's been looking his whole life for a way to end the Shadowfold because it's isolating the country of Ravka, nation of Ravka, from its ports, which is reducing its ability to stay competitive with technology. And the country used to be very wealthy, but now it's very poor. And he needs a sun summoner who will help him disperse the darkness. Alina's that. She doesn't think she is. She doesn't want to be. She's quite scared. But she's scooped up and taken off to a Russian-style palace, which I can't pronounce. It sounds like old something or other. All of that part is really good and feels a bit different from then on. Maybe that's why I eventually stopped reading it. Up until then, Alina is an exciting protagonist because she is pleasingly charm and charmless and klutzy and a bit of all the uninteresting things that make a character actually interesting. As many authors know, a flawless character is not interesting. A flawed character is interesting. Alina is interesting, and she's independent and individual. So she's scooped up. She's taken to this castle where everything is luxury. The Darkling, who is the head of the order, is interested in her. Young adult. So is he interested in her or is he interested in her powers? One of those, both of those. That's a big question. She's sleeping in this castle and there's silk sheets and beautiful clothes and enough to eat, which is a bit of unique in the life of a starving peasant. At that point, it becomes a little bit of a trope because the special kid or young person who's scooped up, taken to school, and whose specialness becomes revealed, that is very much a trope, and it's very much a young adult trope. I actually quite enjoyed it. I like the school, I like the descriptions of the court, I like the dynamics between the Second Army and the rest of the world. I love the descriptions of the court. They felt very oriental, possibly Russian, possibly just lush and beautiful. I enjoyed all of it. If you like that particular young adult trope, complete with mean girls, slowly revealing her specialness, getting over her mental blocks so that she can shine, all that sort of thing, falling in love with two guys, because it's never just one, is it really? And it's always a mediocre woman has incredibly hot men all around falling at her feet. Yeah. If you like that trope, you get that here. If you don't particularly like that trope, I think this is still bearable, because the first part is quite unique, and toward the end it changes again, and everything that you thought you knew is turned on its head, and the end becomes quite exciting. Stop here if you don't want spoilers. So, spoilers. Have you gone away yet? No, you've read it. In that case, you already know that the specialness of the Second Army, their power can be amplified by the amplifiers, which Alina learns about in the school. A couple of people have them. The Darkling wants her to have them because while she has sun summoning power, she doesn't have enough for his purposes, which at that stage we still think are banishing the Shadowfold. Later we find out he isn't as nice a person as he is. Shock, shock, horror, horror, because we didn't see a single indication that might be the case. He may be much older than he says, and he may have actually put the Shadowfold there in the first place, and he might not be trying to really get rid of it. But in any case, he needs Alina to be stronger. In order for her to be stronger, she needs a talisman, an amplifier of her powers. Amplifiers apparently only exist if you find a creature that has amplification and kill it, and then wear its bones or horns or fur or whatever on you, which is kind of icky and kind of gross, and maybe tells you a little bit more about these powers than you wanted to know. The Darkling wants Alina to go and slay a beautiful, mythical silver stag. With the horns, he believes she will be amplified enough to be strong enough for whatever his nefarious purposes are. She doesn't want to do this, and after some warnings, she escapes from the school and the Darkling and goes roaming off the countryside until Mel deserts the army and goes along to help her. And at that point they make a decision that can only really be justified or explained by the fact that you've got 3 books in this series and you need to prop them up. I wouldn't have hated if this book had just finished where it finished, with the two of them escaping. But no, we have to have series these days. It's worth publishers more money if you get 3 books rather than write one perfectly good one. So yeah, we've got a series. This series, by the way, seems quite extensive. You've got numbers 1, 2, and 3, but then you've got a whole heap of points. And I resent points in a series anyway. It seems like a nasty way of making more money off the poor innocent reader than you were going to make anyway. So here you've got number 0.05 and 0.105, and you've got number 1, you've got number 2, but you've got a whole heap of point systems around those as well. I won't read them on principle, unless I end up really loving this series and reading everything about it. But all these little tactics that publishers and some authors use to basically fleece a poor reader into buying 3 copies of the same book and all that sort of stuff, I bitterly resent. If you're a good writer, write good books, we'll buy them. If you're a publisher, I'm pretty sure you're making enough money that you don't need to play all these tricks on people. Anyway, Shadow and Bone trilogy, number 1. At the end of it, spoiler, no spoiler. It's not a spoiler. We knew it. We knew it from the start. The thing with this kind of format of young adult is there aren't really going to be any surprises. As soon as the stag was mentioned, it was obvious that it was going to be killed. Alina was going to end up with an amplifier. But it's the reading that's the journey that you enjoy, and that's fine. So the stag is killed in horrible conditions. Alina rejects the idea of wearing its antlers around her neck, but the Darkling turns up and captures her because he's so much more powerful and forces a necklace, chain around her neck of dead antlers of this poor animal she's killed. Now his idea is that the person who kills the animal controls the amplifier, so he actually kills the stag, not her. He puts the amplifier around her, and the idea is that he'll be able to control her powers. However, she has discovered strength by looking into the eyes of the dying stag, and now she can control her own power. Yeah, anyway, it's good. I'm mocking it because it's a trope, and tropes deserve mocking. But it's fun. I enjoyed it. I finished it all. I'm probably going to keep this book to remind myself that I have read it and enjoyed it, as well as this review and probably a Goodreads review. And I went straight into number 2. So it was good. I liked it. If you like all the tropes I've described, if you like young adult, this is fun. It's particularly nice to have one that feels Occidental or Oriental rather than just mainstream Westerner. That said, while there is a little bit of exoticness about the settings and the names and stuff, it's not so much exoticness that you're going to feel alienated. I feel like the author is probably American, and though perhaps with a love of Russia, or maybe a personal history of Russia, I don't know, but it feels enough American that it won't alienate anyone who wants something a little bit exotic but not too exotic. Anyway, first Shadow and Bone, ignoring all the 0.1s and 0.5s and points 1.2 and infinites. Thoroughly enjoyable. Went straight on to the next one.